No, I'd like to continue. We really want to make sure that we end close to on time, if not absolutely on time. I've really been looking forward to our next panel. We have three great people. Eric Bustillo will be moderating. He is the director of the SEC's Miami Regional Office, involved in lots of enforcement issues, and he'll talk about that in some detail, I'm sure, as he moderates. And he'll introduce our two panelists, Alex Galindez, who's the Vice President of Multicultural Marketing at Prudential, and Manuel Carvalho, who is the President of Hispanic Wealth Consulting. And Manuel and I were talking a while ago about some research that he was working on that was particularly interesting to me. And whenever I hear anybody talking about research, I go, wow, that's interesting. You know, we should do something with that. That sounds like that would be great. And he shared with me, and he showed me what he was working on, and I think you will benefit a lot from that. It'll be a great conversation. I had the opportunity to meet Alex a week or two ago in Miami when Prudential unveiled its study that you see up there. And she'll talk about in some detail, and that was really very exciting. So I'm really happy that both of them are here and excited to hear what they have to say. With that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Eric.
Thanks, Keith, and good afternoon to all. It's a real pleasure for me to be here with you all this afternoon. As Keith indicated, we have two great panelists with substantial experience on issues that affect Hispanics when it comes to planning for retirement. And so let me go ahead and introduce each of them to you. To my right is Alexandra Galindez, and she currently serves as Vice President of Multicultural Marketing at Prudential Financial. In this position, she works with Prudential's retail as well as institutional businesses to increase multicultural customer retention as well as sales. She has a long history in business-to-business as well as business-to-consumer marketing across a variety of industries, including the financial services industry, media, restaurant, as well as consumer packaged goods. And next to her is Manuel Carvalho, and he is the president and founder of an entity by the name of Hispanic Wealth, LLC, which is a consulting company based out of Atlanta, Georgia, that emphasizes on improving the economic well-being of Hispanics in the United States. Him and the company serve institutional providers of financial services to Hispanic segments in the United States, as well as Hispanic providers to institutional investors. Manuel is a seasoned bicultural investment consultant to the institutional market who has worked extensively in Latin America and the United States. Manuel's expertise covers a wide range of strategic services required by institutional investors in defined benefit and defined contribution plans, insurance company reserves, college savings plans, as well as nuclear decommissioning trusts. Having introduced both Alexandra as well as Manuel, I'm going to turn it over to Alexandra, who's going to provide a bit of an overview of the study that Prudential recently released on issues that affect Hispanics as they plan for retirement. And then later on, I'm going to pass it over to Manuel, who's also conducted a study on issues that affect Hispanics and when planning for retirement. More specifically, he concentrated on Mexican Americans, which compose over 50% of the Hispanic population in this country. So with that, I'll pass it over to Alessandra.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks so much, Eric. Hello. So I'm thrilled to be here today. For those of you who were actually in the session right before this, we were listening to the reveal of the African American study as well. And one of the things that just strikes me every time is the synergies that there really are. I am responsible for really closing the gap on what is underserved communities in the U.S. when it comes to all things financial services, and I'm always just dumbstruck when I see the parallels in different communities because it just kind of reminds me of the fact that we've got some work to do as an industry. So what I'd like to do is actually just walk through some of the key findings in the Hispanic financial experience. As Eric mentioned, we did reveal the study about 2 weeks ago in Miami. DC is just as nice, but Miami's got palm trees, so. But I do want to walk through some of the findings and really some of the main takeaways. So with that, surprise, surprise, Hispanics have lower access to group retirement plans. This is actually one of the things that we at Prudential are working on, is really, closing this gap. But one of the things that really struck me when I saw this data is that there's always this assumption that it's an income issue. And we've actually conducted the research, all of our research, to be able to actually slice and dice it, to actually take a look at different income groups, to take a look at whether or not it's Hispanics who were born in the U.S. or Hispanics who are foreign born. And one of the things that struck me with this first finding was that the access, if you actually take a look at the Hispanic breakout, whether it was income less than $75,000 household income or income more than $75,000 household income, the access is not the same. So that basically tells me that, again, as an industry, we've got to really be better about reaching out and communicating our workplace retirement plans to our employees. Because guess what? Our employees are diverse. And very often what we find is that they don't actually know that either the plan exists or the plan benefits. So what ends up happening is that the contribution suffers as a result. So for those who actually do have access to the employer plan, what we found was that there was also in that case a tendency not to invest in that plan. So a lot of that really points to the employer just taking a proactive approach to over communicating with its Hispanic employee base. One thing that was encouraging is when we actually diced up the research and looked at the 75,000 household income plus, and this is on the second column here, we did find that of those employers who did have the access, 83% that were over 75,000 were contributing. But I think really the main message here is that we still have some education and some work to do around what are the benefits of that contribution. When we try to peel the onion a little bit just to better understand why that contribution was not the same as, for instance, our non-Hispanic counterparts, what we found was a lot of myths around what that plan could get you, and also a lot of unknowns regarding what could happen to your money. So here are some of the reasons, some of the barriers why Hispanics in the workplace would not be contributing to their retirement plan. One of the reasons is they don't want to tie up their money. So in the previous session, we heard, money being put under the mattress. Absolutely the case with this group as well, because they have not been brought up to speed on why you would invest and why you would actually give your money somewhere else. And the trust thing is actually something that we'll talk about in a couple of slides. I'm not sure what I would be investing in. Again, that screams for education. If there was certainty around where that money was going, then the contribution would be there. And then finally, not sure what would happen if I retired outside of the U.S. And I think one of the things that was very, very interesting, and this is regardless of Hispanics that are either U.S. born or foreign born, there is always this sentiment that you may actually retire somewhere else, even if you were born in the U.S. And I'm a perfect example. I was born in Miami, Florida. My parents are Colombian, and my tie to Colombia is my parents. But the idea of retiring there just seems really phenomenal. So I might be one of these individuals that, because I don't know what would happen if I did retire in Colombia, I might not actually invest in a plan. So there are these underlying, myths about what could happen to your money, and it's just really a great, great opportunity for education. One of the other things that we saw in the study is there is a huge prioritization of family. And I think we could say for all groups, everybody is family driven. but family is actually a driver with this group. So basically, your responsibility and the obligation that you have around taking care of your parents and taking care of the children and the generation that follows is so great that it actually paralyzes you. And I think, a huge difference can be noted here in this graph slide. So as you can see, when you take a look at the general population and you ask the general population, what is your prioritization of funding education for your children and or family members, you'll see a 6% and an 18% versus, for instance, a 31% and a 15%. So one of the things that we're really focused on is this idea that you can actually do both. If you take small steps and actually solve for your short-term needs, you can actually also solve for your long-term needs. And it's not one or the other, it's actually both with a well-crafted plan. When it comes to the sources of information, and one of the things that really strikes me about this particular slide is, as an industry, and I think we saw this in the panel that preceded me, but as an industry, I think we have this assumption that the community is going to come to us and to our advisors, and they are proactively going to seek us out. And some of that might be true, but before that outreach from the community to the advisor, we might actually be talking to our friends, we might be talking to family, we might be getting our sources of information from media. And one of the things that happens very often is that our network may actually not have any financial planning knowledge either. So you're basically seeking information from others who are in your same exact situation, which creates a little bit of a cycle. So again, glaring, I think, in this slide is really the industry's need for a proactive outreach to some of these communities. And I think this just really supports the point even more so. The outreach from the advisor community just has not been there. And it's not an income thing, it's a community thing. And whether or not you take a look at, populations who are under 75,000 or populations who are over 75,000, there's a huge gap. So as you see here in the first section, the fact that the general population outreach is 65% versus 40% means that somebody is not engaging our communities. And that's something that we really, really need to focus on. And a lot of our efforts have actually been dedicated not just to educating the community, but to actually educating advisors about the opportunity that exists in these communities. And one of the things that we use to actually motivate advisors to reach out to communities that they may have historically not reached out to is the data point on the right-hand side, which basically reveals that if you do reach out, guess what? There is a payoff because Hispanics, just like the total population, are going to listen to what you have to say. Very often when we talk to advisors, there is this fear of talking to a community that potentially they're not intimate with. And then there's this fear of rejection. And one of the things that we've seen actually in all of our studies, in all of our multicultural studies, is the fact that when you actually do talk, these communities listen, that they want the information, they want the education, but for some reason, there's this gap in outreach. Key barrier being trust and not language. This actually speaks to the survey respondents, which was total U.S. population. Obviously, as you start to break down more into the Spanish-dominant Hispanics, you'll start to see some of those shifts. But I think the main point here, which was actually absolutely evident in what we saw in the African-American study, is that trust is an issue. And it's no wonder, right? We haven't reached out. We haven't proactively educated this community. So to expect that there would be a trust would probably be a little ambitious. The great thing, though, is that the lack of trust that exists in this community, unlike some of what you see actually in other communities, is not due to a negative experience. So it's not like the financial services industry wronged anybody. It's actually lack of exposure, which means that our point of departure is actually a better spot than if we had actually done wrong by these individuals. So one of the things that we focus on, on a daily basis is really trying to educate advisors and arm them with the insights and the knowledge to be able to nurture those relationships and to build that trust. Other barriers that you'll see here, again, go with hand in hand with the lack of exposure. I have difficulty understanding different financial products and services. And, for those of you who listen to my bio, I'm new to financial services. I've been in financial services for a year and a half. Before that, I was actually the consumer that was surveyed in this study. And when I first came into the industry and I heard some of the jargon, I thought, oh my gosh, can I get that, the version of that for dummies? Because I have no idea what you're talking about. And I think one of the things that we tend to do as an industry is talk to ourselves. So what we're hearing here is not just give me your complex terms in Spanish. It's actually give me the terms in a way that I can understand and that I can relate to, because guess what? I wasn't born with the financial planning DNA. Your terms of Social Security and all of that actually might be a little new to me if I've only been in the country for a couple of years. So you might need to actually walk me through some of these terms that you actually take for granted. I don't know where to go to for information. I think, again, one of the other things that we see in the other communities is the go-to for information is actually the advisor. But if there has been no contact with advisors historically, then of course this community is going to feel like they don't know where to go. As I mentioned, when you start actually taking a look at Spanish dominant, things do change a little bit, and that's where you'll really see the importance of the language. But it's not a translate technical terms into Spanish. It's really talk to me in terms that I would understand, that are more familiar with my experience, and maybe even do a little bit of hand-holding. Oops. So it's no wonder that the ownership of all financial products would be very, very low. And one of the things that we've seen in some of our other studies is, for instance, the African American community. Life insurance is something that's very, very close and personal. It's something that you're raised with. It's something that you're you place a value on from a very, very young age. With Hispanics, it's different. Again, this is a community that might have 2 or 3 generations that actually came from elsewhere, so that financial planning DNA isn't there, and that actually spans for all financial planning products, whether it's protection products or investment products. And you can see some of the biggest gaps obviously exist with the investment products, but the gaps are also there with life insurance, which in the industry is usually the conversation starter. That ownership is a lot lower than it is for the general population. So, because there's no education, because the outreach hasn't been there, then it's no wonder that asset building would be a challenge, right? Nobody has told us about it. As you can see here, regardless of income, whether it's 75,000 household income plus or minus, there is still a huge, huge gap in the financial assets, and that is total financial assets, employer retirement plans, and home equity. And I think this gap here in assets is really something that as an industry we should be working toward, because again, it's just an education process, and it's really just an opportunity, I think, for all of us. So with that, here is our disclaimer, and I'm going to turn it over to Manuel. I guess I'll let your eyes rest on this for a little bit. All right.
Okay, there we go. Thank you very much. Thanks. Thank you very much. Thanks, Keith, for the invitation. Commissioner, thanks for having us here. First of all, I'm going to start by trying to make a small difference in terms of what we are going to talk. The problems of Hispanics and African Americans are very similar in many, many terms. But the first thing that my company did when trying to understand this problem a little bit better was to break the Hispanic segment into two, because I think that painting the Hispanic as just one brush is not the correct approach. The correct, not the correct approach, but the approach we took is just try to focus our study first on first-generation Hispanics, the ones that come directly from other countries that immigrate to the U.S. later on in life. There are a lot of studies out there that show how second-generation Hispanics are very close in mentality and way of thinking to white Americans or Americans once you have a second generation. And even kids below 10 years of age, they grow in the American culture, and they are very common themes. So second generation Hispanics can be thought in very much the same terms as the problems that you can see in African Americans or other low-income populations. The study that we did was focused on first-generation Hispanics, people that were born outside of the U.S. and have come here, and we wanted to see how would that look like. And the first thing we did is we tried to reach to a sample that would be representative of the type of problems that we were looking for. And we concentrated on Mexicans because we had a way of conducting a study in that segment. So we provided a survey. We got a huge response. 4,169 people responded to our survey, 50 states from Alaska to Florida. And just to give you an idea, you would have here the population of Mexican origin. We are talking about 52, almost 53 million Hispanics in the U.S., out of which 34 close are Hispanics. So 64% of the Hispanic population is either Mexican or of Mexican origin. Now, if you look at this, born in the U.S. for total population is 33.6 relative to, let's call it 19 million of foreign-born. That tells you one thing, and that is the second and third generation Hispanics are by, right now the rule. Those are the dominant piece of the puzzle. It is also the case for Mexican origin. You have 22 million, although you have a significant number of immigrants, so almost, let's call it 12 million. I'm going to do some calculations later on. And here you have one of the big issues. They are talking about 11 million unauthorized immigrants in general, in the whole Hispanic population, or close to 6 million in particularly of Mexican origin Hispanics. So I'm going to be referring to this. This is the survey conducted on this group. The first thing we tried to identify was, hey, who wants to go back and retire in their home country? And 55% said, okay, I want to retire in Mexico. Now, when I was analyzing this and reviewing it with experts, they said, no, that's not going to happen. That answer was made with the heart, not with the head. But take one moment, because there is economic information behind it that makes it very credible. For example, the intention to go back in cities like New York, San Diego. New York is 86%. Why happens? Well, it's so expensive that they are not going to return, migrate to Florida to retire in Florida. Most of them are thinking about going back to their home country. Same thing happened in the San Diego, same thing happened in Chicago. So I do acknowledge that there might be some people that are gonna stay, maybe not that many go back. But I think it's an issue that we need to be concerned in terms of how many retire. Now, if more people stay, let's say 55%, let's assume that 50% stay and 50% go back. 50% of 12 million people that we said are Mexicans, or 19 million of foreign immigrants. We're talking about what it's going on with 10 million immigrants, Hispanic immigrants that are right now in the U.S. and they are gonna stay in the U.S. And that was one of the implications of the study. One of the things that I wanted to get information of. Implied in that, of that 6 million, some of them have papers. They have correct immigration status. They are going to receive pensions from Social Security, but at least 4 million Mexicans will reach out retirement age in the U.S. that are not planning to come back, to Mexico, and they will not be covered, they will not be entitled to a Social Security pension. So that's an issue, because and we're going to see it a little bit later, Social Security is the major benefit or the major pillar in supporting Hispanic and Mexican families in the U.S. We talked through the day about the problem of access, and this is the key point. This is not something I discovered. The NCLR in 2009 conducted a study and said the lack of access to employer-sponsored retirement plans for Latinos has far greater impact on retirement security than nuances on 401k plan design, trends on employee behavior. And I couldn't agree more. The Center for Retirement Research at Boston College also said African Americans and Hispanics are still less likely to have the kinds of jobs in which participation in a 401k plan is possible. So Hispanics, yeah, many of us are doing your gardens and working at the restaurants, but those employers do not provide social retirement benefits. So what was the question? The question I asked, and I remember before, I think Michael mentioned that 36% for all Hispanics is the number that is covered by a pension plan. This is a group of first generation Mexicans in the U.S., and I asked them, okay, the company I work for offers a pension plan, and only 28% work for companies that do offer a pension plan. And then I asked them, okay, and I participate in that plan, and only 18% participate in that plan. I asked them, okay, I am a U.S. citizen or permanent resident, and this has to do because for Social Security purpose, you have to be a U.S. citizen or a permanent resident. If you're working here under HB1 visa, you are earning credits, but you're still not entitled to any security benefit at the end of the job. So it's not about only illegal immigrants. There are many immigrants that are here on working visa, but as long as they are not permanent resident, they do not get the benefit out of Social Security. So the issue there is when you see Hispanics that do not have this immigration status, participation on the plan is much lower. Look at the note here. Rate of participation is 75% when they are citizens versus only 48% when they are not citizens. So there you have, in terms of this participation, if we do not address the issue of what to give Hispanics that are not employed by the big companies, we would not be solving pretty much anything. Dependency on Social Security was another big important issue. And the Hispanic Institute releases a study in 2009 where they said since they have less access to and participation in employer-sponsored retirement plans, Hispanics are more dependent on Social Security for retirement income. And we saw that that's also the case for African-American communities. Both Hispanics and African-Americans are much likely to depend on Social Security. Social Security is a much larger portion of their income at retirement. Hispanics, though, are at a disadvantage when it comes to receiving Social Security benefits. 76% of Hispanics receive Social Security benefits compared to 91% of whites. So not only do they receive smaller amounts of Social Security, but actually participation is lower. And the issue there, again, is this problem about not having the adequate immigrant status. Just to give you an idea, we asked, okay, question number 6 was, I expect to receive a pension from Social Security in the United States. 52% of the people, yes, they do expect to receive some sort of pension from the SSA. Another question, I have received a statement from the SSA, and only 18% had received a statement. And then when I cross all those 3 questions, out of the 52% that expect to receive, actually it's only 10% that have either seen a statement and are U.S. citizens or permanent residents, have the immigration status that would allow them to. So pretty much we have a big issue of false expectations. If we have more than half of the Hispanic population expecting a Social Security benefit that they're not going to get, then we are in trouble, because we mentioned that there's going to be 4 million people here that are expecting Social Security, let's call it, and then 10%, only 400,000 actually receiving it. Then what are we going to do with the other 3.6 million? I mean, those people are pretty much going to be destitute in retirement. They're not going to have a source of income to support themselves. We talked about family support, and this is another important piece of the study. Prudential not only released this study, it released another one in 2008 where they surveyed people or Hispanics earning more than 35,000. And they came to the conclusion that the family network is not a retirement plan, and I couldn't agree more. It is not, but Hispanics do rely on family. That is a big component of who we are. Family structures are totally different, right? I am one of 5, my wife is one of 9, and we both support our parents, but that gets distributed among a lot of us. Now, once we immigrate to the U.S., families tend to be smaller, so it's not the same as distributing the weight in 4 or 5 kids than in 2, right? But more important to that, let's talk about our findings. The first question, I'm willing to support my parents in retirement if they don't have sufficient resources. Okay, 90%, yeah, I'm willing. We asked the parents, I expect my children's financial support during my old age. 59% are expecting. That's their retirement game plan. Okay, my kids are going to bail me out. I give money to support my parents or in-laws in their old age. 57% do give money. Either one of my parents or my in-laws lives with me at home. 25%. I was shocked to see such a big number. I mean, clearly, Hispanic families, we are close. But at the end of the day, some people that have their parents or in-laws at home, they did not respond that they do support them with money. So people supporting either with home or money, it ends up to 63%. When we talked about this, the problem that we see is that really we're going to see a clash of cultural values. Hispanics, we have religion majority being Catholics by and large when coming to the U.S., and that puts a lot of thinking and a lot of responsibility on family relationships. And that is kind of the Hispanic model. But the Anglo-American model is a model more based on personal responsibility. You are entitled to enjoy your life, but you are also responsible for your own good being. None of you want to be a burden to your kids, and I think that's the same case. But all I want to mention right now is that we are coming from a very different cultural values. And what's going on is that our kids, my kids, second generation, well, my kids were born in Mexico, but they came here all before 10, so I can see how they have been acculturated to U.S. When I say, hey, you are my retirement, they say, what? I mean, nobody is having that conversation with Hispanic kids in terms of, hey guys, do you know that your parents have these expectations about you? And I think that's a question that we would be good just placing it on the table, saying there is a disconnect between the cultural values that our kids are learning in the U.S. and when they either they are a second generation or they will become a second generation that we need to confront. So this changes in the value system of our children due to assimilation is a piece of the puzzle that needs to be considered. The study runs, there are 15 yes and no questions, very simple. Half of the population doesn't even have responded, that not even half have a completed high school diploma. But you can see the whole survey if you want go to HispanicWealth.com and you can download it. But here are 3 of the main conclusions. Mexican immigrants are going to be a problem in both countries. They're going to be destitute. Those 6 million that are going to retire and go back to Mexico, they're going to be also in a very difficult position. That's a problem for Mexican government as well. The expectations of receiving a pension from the Social Security is really unwarranted. And then a family as the established safety net is something that we need to revisit, or at least put in the conscious and minds of Hispanic what the real problem is. Thanks.
Thank you, Manuel, and thank you, Alexandra. So let me throw a few questions, and then we'll open it up for the audience to ask whatever questions they may have. You know, obviously the reliance on the family net for retirement purposes seems to be something that is, well across all Hispanics, all Hispanic groups, not just the Mexican Americans. So you're talking about a cultural issue.
Yeah.
So how do you go about changing it going forward?
I mean, this is a very good question, but I think there is a good answer, and that is you need to make that filial tie work for you. And that is you can engage Hispanic kids to actually be the ones kind of pushing their parents to save. If you educate the kid saying, hey, your parent is expecting you to bail it out, and you create the conscience of saying, hey, kid, you are going to be bailing it out. Why don't you help me tell your parent that he needs to save? We would be doing a service to Hispanic families if we can engage kind of the reverse system, get the kids involved in terms of saying, you learn in the school or you learn in society that you need to be responsible. Help us getting your parents there. And the few examples that we have worked with, this is something at least all kids are willing, or I mean, not only kids, kind of young adults as well, are willing to do because they know that they are going to be on the hook if they don't a couple years down the road.
Alexandra, in reading your study from Prudential, I saw that there's this concept that Hispanics view themselves as savers, not investors.
Yes.
What do you,
Well,
what does that mean, and why are they not considering themselves investors?
Well, I think there's actually two parts to that data point. Is they see themselves more as savers, not investors, but actually there's a large percentage that don't see themselves as either. So not savers or investors, which basically means they haven't defined themselves, because again, very often this is a new conversation. I think one of the things that might actually have a tie to that is the cultural aversion to debt. There were a couple of statistics in there that were really revealing. We are just not a debt type of culture. One of the things that we saw in the study was that Hispanics would rather not buy than actually borrow. So there's this whole sentiment that, if you can't afford it, you just don't buy it, which if you think about what we're asking them to do in terms of financial planning products, I mean, we're basically asking them to put money into something that, they might not currently have the money for. I mean, it's a really, really big ask if you think about the cultural aversion to debt. So I think the more important part on that is the not a saver, not an investor either. I just haven't even identified.
And in terms of this whole concept of good debt,
Right.
what is it that the study refers to? What is it that it
Yeah.
means when it talks about good debt?
Yeah, an overwhelming amount of respondents said that doesn't actually even exist. So there is no such thing as good debt. So think about the work that we have to do, from a community perspective. If there is just no such thing as, building credit, having any type of good debt, it's basically a cash culture. When you look at the demographics, the cash might not be there today, but it's really to change the conversation on how you can build the wealth long term.
Yes, Manuel.
Eric, let me just give some thought onto that question, because you got to remember that Hispanics that have immigrated to the U.S. come from Latin America, in which financial markets were not developed when they came here. So they don't have that culture to emulate. Even the Mexican financial market, think of it 20 years ago, it was non-existent. Then if you top onto that many Latin American countries had financial crises that actually affected the savings of many people in banks. Think of the Corralito in Argentina or the Mexican nationalization of banks back in the 70s or 80s. It is not only that they have kind of be careful, they have a reason to be careful with. I was participating about 3 months ago in a panel about investing in dollars, and then the only question that came from the public is, hey, how do we know those dollars are protected in Mexico and this is not going to happen the same as it happened in 1972? And I was kind of shocked, because the only question came from a person that was maybe in their 30s about something that happened 42 years or so ago. So those wounds are present. They are told from in that case, from generation to generation. So that's not going to be easy to erase. The thing that we can do is engage them into having the kids, as I said, turn this not in a personal discussion, turn it into a family discussion.
Just to chime in on that, I completely agree, Manuel, with the really giving that role to that second or third generation. They're already doing this. Every Hispanic family actually has the translator, who is usually somebody, a millennial, 18 to 34, that has actually taken on the role of translating U.S. things to the parents and to the grandparents. So that they've already got the role. This is just another input of information that they could actually take to the family.
Now, let me ask you, both of your studies, found that a significant number of Hispanic Americans think about retiring outside of the United States. Is there any data that at this point shows whether that is indeed something that occurs? And as we move forward, how likely is that to happen?
I think first the data is not there. Immigration data is very difficult to get by. But what I found is the following. First, when we think of retirement, we think age 65, and what happens with immigrants, that's not quite the case. The case is, as Commissioner Aguilar was mentioning in the morning, people expect to retire at 65, but then happen that they are forced out of work maybe in their 50s, 55, or even earlier. And particularly this segment of the population that don't have very tough skills in terms of thinking is just kind of manual labor. What happens is they spend a couple of years trying to get a new job. Any type of savings that they had are usually depleted in that job search. And there comes a point in which they don't have the assets and they just decide to return. So just as much as they trickle to the U.S. when coming in, many of them are trickling down at some point anywhere between 50 to 60, and the stories of successful pensions there are just not very common. The ones that are successful are the ones that you see staying here in the U.S. There's always the guy that had the entrepreneurial spirit and had many other things going for them. Now, the other point that I want to address is that for Hispanics in particular, we're really looking at a tip of an iceberg in terms of immigration. The big wave of immigration, kind of 10 millions, has come to the U.S. pretty much in the past 20 years. So before, it was the people that are already retired is people that were here when maybe there were 1 or maybe let's say 4 million immigrants. Not now that, I mean, in the case of Mexicans, not now that we have 14 million Mexican here. So I think that also obscures the numbers. But that is why it is very important to focus on this group, because those 20 million that have come in the past 20 years or so are the ones that are going to be retiring 15, 20 years from now. And those are the ones where we can do something about it.
Let me ask you something else that was shown by both of your studies is that Hispanic Americans usually when they do save and they do invest, tend to invest in products that are, typically income oriented. Those that where the yield is usually substantially less than other financial products. Why is that the case? And um, if the goal is to sort of have them, invested in a more varied, set of financial products, how does one go about accomplishing that?
I think there's a conservative spirit, I think, in the group, and probably because of that, history of having maybe bad experiences, passed down by generation. But really, that's the key for the role of the advisor, is to really just expand and broaden that portfolio, because the natural instinct is going to be, to be safe, and to be very conservative. And I think it's really just due to lack of exposure, and that's where the advisor can come in and say, hey, we can broaden your perspective to get you to your short and your long-term goals.
Let me just follow up, but you talk about advisors, and I believe your study indicates that Hispanic Americans tend to be less contacted by advisors.
Yeah.
Why is that?
I think there is, well, from an advisor perspective, very, very often the approach is, okay, my time is my money, right? So I'm going to want to go to the lowest hanging fruit. And while there are a lot of advisors that have more of a long-term, relationship development perspective, not all of them are that way. So I think it really requires a long-term view. I think the other thing is that advisors actually just don't know how to approach. I think there's some fear around not really knowing culturally what motivates this group. A lack of exposure to the community might actually make you stay away from the community. So I think that has a lot to do with it.
So, I mean, Hispanic Americans are, the statistics show they're the fastest growing minority in the United States, and they're likely to become a significant portion of the population in this country. So, what do you do to get advisors to sort of contact this
Right.
this sector, which is obviously fast growing and one that ultimately can result in substantial business for them, while at the same time resulting in substantial benefit to those whom they help?
Right. Well, of course, I would have to direct the community. Prudential.com, Hispanic, that's where we're actually asking a lot of people who have questions just to get started, because I think the first thing is just taking the first step. Being proactive, and then the advisor may come. So maybe second or third phase is, once you've identified that this is actually something that you're committed to, then the second or third step could be the advisor. But there are plenty of resources also. I think local organizations exist as well that actually start that conversation. We are putting together also programs with what we call centers of influence. So individuals that we know are actually already having similar types of discussions, whether it's lawyers and or accountants. Everybody's got to do their taxes, and that's a good place, to start. Just to start to seed some of this financial planning type of just exposure with the folks that we know are already having those conversations. And for Hispanics, I mean, a lot of Hispanics might not have a financial plan. They've almost always got an accountant.
I think, Eric, that the issue is, I mean, financial planners are in short amount, even for the population at large. With now many more baby boomers, the need for financial planners is general, not only in Hispanics, not only in African Americans, even for whites. So asking a financial planner to focus on people who's on average earnings are much lower than higher, I think it's a hard sell, because at the end of the day, they earn based on assets under management. I don't see a good headway. The Hispanics that have money, the Hispanics that have an education, that are second or even first generation but have an education, have come to this country in some way, believe me, they are already taken care of, and we receive advice, and it's done in English, and it's by no means different than what it's provided to any other people with certain amount of assets. I think that for the lower segments, it needs to be some sort of institutional effort, either government agencies, either American Hispanic chambers of commerce. I think we need to engage religious groups that all try to leverage the amount of influence you can get, because you're only going to have one speaker. If you go one by one with the financial advisor, I don't think you're going to get very far. I think you need to leverage your efforts there.
I
So,
think, oh, I'm
go
sorry,
ahead.
Eric. What I was going to say is, if I had my magic wand and I could, do something big from an industry perspective, I would get to that translator, to that younger generation who the burden will be on them. And I know this all too well because it happened to me. I didn't realize that I was my parents' retirement plan until I actually had kids of my own, and now I'm like trying to balance both. And it was like, gosh, I wish you would have told me when I was 25. I would have planned things a little differently, So if I had one thing that I could do, it would really be to get, the ambassador and the translator and the household to start this conversation early.
So let me ask you, because I think, it's, this concept of planning for retirement obviously just doesn't affect Hispanic Americans. It affects, the whole country. As we move, or we seem to be moving into a system where the individual has to take his or her own responsibility for planning for retirement, how much more challenging does that make it for Hispanic Americans, for African Americans? And if it was up to the both of you to sort of come up with a plan to address that,
Right.
what would be at the top of your list?
I would put myself in the environments that I know that they're already in. I think, again, as an industry, we assume that Hispanics are online researching annuity information, and they're not. But they might be online planning for some type of life event, or there might be something that really triggers the need for financial planning. But instead of, putting ourselves into the annuity space, why didn't we put ourselves in the space where we knew that there was something happening in their life that could trigger this type of discussion? So, and I'm a marketer, so it's my role to do this. It's my role to make myself seen in the environment where they are already.
Manuel?
Yeah, I think the best way to help Hispanics right now is to start a conversation about how can they get the benefits from Social Security. The most difficult part in any retirement program is getting the contributions, and Social Security is actually collecting the contributions. It's going to be difficult for many Hispanics that are very, very low earners to pay Social Security tax and then get another money from someplace else and put it on my RA account. I think that we should be devoting ourselves to making those dollars that they are already contributing, make those work, make those count. I mean, that is, I know politically probably reforming Social Security has been said many things, but I think it's we've come to a point where delaying that conversation is just going to backfire us. We are very good at kicking the can, and yes, we can kick the can 20, 40 years into the future, but that's a problem that has to do with demography. It's not a Social Security program. It is a demography program, and we can delay it, but we are not solving it. And there are ways to say, okay, let's put that in the table. Let's break the problem in two. Let's stop. Let's at least not keep it compounding, and let's address that issue. I think that for Hispanics, Social Security is the majority of the benefit, and I think that's going to continue for a couple of decades at least.
Although, let me play devil's advocate. I mean, Social Security, even today, it's typically just not enough to provide for somebody to retire. So, is that really the solution?
When we talk about the three-legged stool, we talked about Social Security, private pensions, and personal savings. And Hispanics rely on none right now. So that's a hard place to start. If you give that people kind of that basic step, I'm not saying that the other two do not need to be there. All I'm saying is that at least let's give that segment of security to a segment of the population that really needs it.
Okay, we're getting close to our time for the next panel, and we wanted to open it up for questions.
Any?
Yes, sir.
Can you move over to the mic? Thanks.
First of all, thanks for a very informative presentation. One of the perceptions which may not be valid is that a lot of the Hispanic workers, construction, gardeners, domestic help, people in the hotels, are sending a lot of money back to Guatemala or to other places, which would be a form of saving.
Right.
And that maybe there is method in the madness, and that they are really thinking about going back, and this is part of, they're not just taking care of the family that they left there, but building up some assets there for when they go back. Is there is that something that could be happening?
Yeah, definitely that's the intention, but the execution is not there. When Hispanics send remittances, part of their, basically they cover three things. Education for maybe kids that were left there, usually the building of a house or expanding a house, and then day-to-day living. The way that it's done, since there are no financial institutions on the receiving end for this segment, they usually do not have bank accounts on the countries in which they receive the money. Usually they get to departments, well, let's call it furniture stores, etc. So I cannot tell you the amount of HD TVs you can find in cities where there is no high definition, and you would see high definition TVs in places where there is no running water. So priorities are there, but then you have all this industry in the receiving end that is making that very hard. Actually, one of the intentions of the study is to go into that, how to make that receiving end a little bit more efficient. But right now there is very little data. What we know is that it's not working.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Catherine Turner, and thank you so much. It's definitely been very interesting. Sure. I had a question. When we talked about the African American community, we talked about some of the issues such as more African American women leading homes, and even being single parents and dealing with the sandwich between college and elderly parents. And I wanted to know, is this also facing the Hispanic community, and how are those issues being addressed?
I can take that. So the head of household dynamic that exists in the African American community doesn't necessarily translate to the Hispanic community. However, what it does, just studying and knowing that dynamic exists, actually is something that we take into even like product development and the way that we, develop our products and how we position them. So we know that for the African American community, there is this dynamic. So when we are developing products, we want to also make sure that the benefits exist that would be able to really address some of those concerns. So we really try and study the communities, try to get to know all of their dynamics and how that is going to impact their decision making. One thing that does actually translate is the 3-generation household. So we see that both for Hispanic and African American, and the products that we're developing and the way that we're talking about the products that we're developing, you will actually see key differences in how we talk about them, knowing that dynamic exists with Hispanics and with African Americans.
Manuel, does that apply to Hispanic Mexican Americans as well, or?
Yeah, I think it does. The Hispanics families in general are a lot more cohesive. Now, having said that, you can see a very marked distinction between first generation Hispanics, where the level of marriage of integral homes is much higher than in second generation Hispanics. It's kind of it gets watered down. Other cultural issues happen. So Hispanics would live, for example, together, but marriage is not necessarily there. So so you have kind of a zone of acculturation, even for family. But by and large, Hispanic families are much closer together than African American families.
One of the things I'm fascinated by this dynamic, as I'm sure you'll see, but you know, the woman head of household in the African American community, when you think about the need and the one individual looking across all communities that really has a fundamental need for protection products, it's really her. I mean, think about the burden, you know, and the obligation that she has on top of her. So even more reason to reach out to her. And, you know, historically, she may have actually been overlooked by the industry because, you know, she's not married, the assets might not be there. But when you think about if you were actually being led by the need, not the assets, you would actually start with her. And I'm fascinated by her. So we spend a lot of time just trying, you know, to make sure that we're getting our products to her specifically.
Thank you very much.
I guess. Sorry, one more comment on that. There is the perception that low-level Hispanics do not save, and let me tell you that they do save. The fact that on average they can send $380 per every 2 weeks to their countries, that's the average remittance. In some cases, that's 50-60% of their income. And not only that, but women are responsible, for example, for saving for something that is called the fiesta de 15 años, or when girls, quinceañera, well, sweet 16 or 15. And sometimes you see those parties and they really put on a show. So there is this way of solidarity. Some of that money comes from asking friends and family to chime in. But nonetheless, the point that I want to make is that when they do want to get assets, when they do want to save, even if it's in small amounts and even if it's under the mattress, they do find the discipline to do it.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to thank Alexandra Galindez and Manuel Carballo.
Thank you.
No, thank you.